and welcome to On Mute Now Podcast Season 3. We are 4 ladies on a mission to raise the volume on the conversations that matter. To those of you joining us on the live stream, thank you. You can join in on the banter and lively discussions across our social media and other podcast platforms. Are you ready? Let's go.
Hello, everyone. Unmute friends and family. It's Friday Night Live. Tonight, I'm going to be a lead host. I'm Yolande. And as usual, keeping me company, we've got our fabulous 3 ladies. Natasha, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. A bit tired. Endorphins are still high from our winter wellness walk.
Angela, and you?
I'm good. Ditto what Natasha just said.
Raquel, and what about you?
Oh
Raquel, are
dear.
you there? Are you frozen?
Raquel's frozen, literally from the winter walk.
Hi,
Oh, no, there's movement.
It's just back. Hi, everyone. Sorry. And I hope that's the end of me being frozen.
Well, look, the ladies have alluded to our winter wellness walk, which we ably completed tonight. I don't know what pains and aches will set in by tomorrow, but thank you to all those of you who would have sponsored us, or those of you who were rooting for us from home. We made it. So tonight, or this evening, we're at episode 5. Guys, can you believe it? We're mid-season, episode 5. And this evening, we're going to be talking about a topic that's a little bit tricky. We're going to be looking at positive discrimination. And really, the question is there a case for positive discrimination? Before we really get into the meat of the discussion, as they say, you know that we are on mute now, where we raise the volume on the whispered conversations in our communities. And we've got our listeners who are really doing well in sending us those taglines. And we've got 2 of those for you tonight.
On mute now, raising the volume on the whispered conversations in our communities.
On mute now, raising the volume on the whispered conversations in our communities.
Well done. And thank you to those 2 Unmute fans who have sent in their videos and their audio, and to all of you who have been very well keeping us entertained and keeping those taglines coming. So don't forget, those of you who haven't done so yet, there's still 5 more episodes to go. Come on, send those taglines in. So let's get started. This conversation tonight is going to be a tricky one, as I said. And so right off the bat, I'm going to ask the ladies to answer the question. Do you ladies think there is a case for positive discrimination, or do you not? I'm going to start with Natasha. Why are y'all?
I had a feeling. Should we just define positive discrimination for anyone who might be out there, Yolande? Do you want to have a go at that before I say?
Absolutely, Natasha. I mean, you put your spin on it. I'm sure we could all chip in. But yes, you're right. Positive discrimination in the light of the whole context of inequality is whether or not there is scope for organizations or agencies, companies to potentially give place in a positive way to people who might fit under what we call those special characteristics. So for example, if you're a company, do you have any mechanism in place where you can specifically offer a job to someone who is perhaps of the ethnic minority race as opposed to someone from the majority group? Or is there scope to especially give that job to someone who is disabled as opposed to an able-bodied person for various reasons. So we're going to delve into that kind of conversation tonight.
Okay.
And we see Ezekiel saying, interesting topic. Looking forward to it. Ezekiel, we thought we weren't going to have you tonight, but we're so glad you're here, Ezekiel. Well done.
No worries. Well, to answer the question, I do think that there is a case for positive discrimination, because we know that there are a number of institutions and organizations, whether political or social, that maybe historically were for one group of people. And as you know, as we've gone through the decades and society has developed and everyone is all about equality and diversity, we know that space should be made, and there are people who qualify to be in certain positions within those organizations or institutions that were previously kept out just because they didn't fit the prototype or the race or the ability or stuff like that. So I think that there is a case for positive discrimination in that aspect. However, not just for a tick box exercise, not just for the sake of filling a quota or saying, well, yes, we have somebody from this group or that group or that group. I do still think that persons need to earn that place in terms of be qualified for that place. If you're qualified for the position, then I think, yes, that the company or organization should seek persons, the highest qualified persons from a group outside of the dominant group, to put into that organization and make it more diverse. Because the diversity is the key to everything, the variety. If everyone looks like you and thinks like you, then you're more or less going to be creating the same product over and over. But you get different ideas in, different cultures, different, opinions, and you make a better product overall. That's what I think.
Okay. Angela, Natasha has probably said it all for all of us.
Sorry.
Well, I'm comfortable with the definition that Natasha gave it. My only concern is that actually when we talk about positive discrimination, particularly in the UK, when you look at how it's defined in the UK, it's not quite the way that Tacit has defined it, right? So, but when it's the way that it's defined, and let's just be clear, positive discrimination is illegal in the UK. So that's why we're asking the question, is there a case for it? And the way that it's defined here is that essentially where you are, as Yolande said, taking somebody with some certain special characteristics which are defined in law, so your race, your gender, disability, and so on and so forth, and using that to put that person in a position that they would otherwise not have been qualified for. In other words, it's not about merit anymore. You would prefer that person because of those special characteristics over somebody who is more qualified and would merit that position. So that's the way that when you look at it in the UK, and that's why it's illegal in the UK, because it's still discrimination. However, in the way that Tacit defined it there, where you have somebody who is, who does merit that position, and essentially if you're looking at a situation where you've got two people who both merit to be in that position, how do you then make a decision? And I think the concern is that in some workplaces, the things like unconscious bias, that exists in the recruitment process, in the promotion process, can weed out somebody who, like Natasha said, doesn't look like the majority, doesn't sound like the majority. And so it's in those circumstances where you're saying, right, this person's coming in on merit. However, they would possibly be at a disadvantage because of these particular characteristics. And so we may well decide to to discriminate positively and give them the position so that we can get, that better balance in terms of diversity, understanding that we're doing it not just for a tick box, but because we understand that diversity is key in an organization, and that every organization is enriched by diversity. So looking at it from that perspective, I'm comfortable with it. There's still a lot, that needs discussing, but yeah, let me leave it there for now.
Right, Raquel, over to you.
I have to say I'm still not fully comfortable in my mind on which side of the fence I sit. I think on this one I'm probably on the fence. As described by Natasha, I would agree that there are cases where steps need to be taken to redress the balance because it is weighted against certain individuals. And unless something is done, then it is actually unfair to those individuals. At the same time, I believe in as Angela was referring to, the whole, the whole idea that the person is there because they're capable of doing the job, and if they aren't, is there any point? Sorry for the
Right.
background noise.
Okay, Raquel, yes. So I'm just going to add my 2 cents. And I see in the chat, Michael is saying discrimination is very subtle these days. Obviously, I suppose in that context, negative discrimination. Tonight, my feeling is that there is a case for positive discrimination, albeit that it is illegal in the UK. And it is illegal simply because of the way it is defined. If the definition is redefined, then in my mind, there is a case for it. And the reason why I say that is two ways, two reasons. I don't think that the playing field is ever level
It's
anyway.
not level.
So whenever you're saying that people are coming in on merit and they should come in on a level playing field, in the first place, it's not level at all, because there are only certain kinds of people that can go to certain kinds of school, that can obtain a certain level of education, that may live in certain neighborhoods. And so at the end of the day, as we have already alluded to, the balance is set, already lopsided against certain people. So to me, again, it is about redressing that balance. And it's only by taking, as Angela might, want to elaborate on, positive action, which in a sense is an output of positive discrimination. It's only by taking some form of positive action that we can redress that balance. The other thing for me, obviously, is when we're talking about whether or not we're bordering on it being tokenistic. And who says that tokenism is a bad thing? I don't know that it is a bad thing in some instances when we're looking at positive discrimination. So it is a tricky thing to kind of get around. So it probably moves us, unless you girls have anything else to add, it probably moves us nicely right into the next question.
I
Go
do
on,
have something.
Raquel.
Yes, I do have something I want to add, and I was just going to throw in that I have been the token person in particular settings, and I've known that I'm there as the token person. And on the one hand, it's uncomfortable because you think to yourself, you would never have considered me. You would never have considered me, except for the fact that you needed a person to tick this box. And yet, when I get to that table, there is so much I have to offer, so much I have to bring. So, yes, on that score, yes. But at the same time, it's that feeling of, really, you think you're doing me a favor by bringing me to this table? I can more than do this. And it's condescending to pretend that, I have to do this to get you here because, well. So, yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that, Raquel.
And I know there's a lot of conversation going on in a wider context in the UK about ethnic monitoring and things like that. And it brings us back to when we had the HR episode, when we asked about how do companies use that form that you fill out, that monitoring form when you apply for jobs. And the response we got at that time is that it is separate and apart between the HR and between your actual, your manager. So they don't know who's coming in. I accept that, but I still really get uncomfortable filling out those forms for whatever reason. It's just an innate feeling as to.
Oh, dear, we lost Yolande there. But I think just to follow on the thought that she was making until she unfreezes was that sometimes you can, I think, even though sometimes, is she back? Sometimes you can still tell. Even though
I am back.
Oh, you're back now. Sorry, Yolande, you go ahead. I was just going to continue with you about the ethnic minority forms.
Oh, I didn't realize that I was frozen. Sorry, Natasha. What? I don't know where you lost me.
No, you were just saying something about the forms, the ethnic minority forms that are filled out when you get a job, and then I didn't hear what you said after that.
Oh, sorry. For me personally, I'm still uncomfortable with filling them out. Although the explanations that we've been given is rational, but it's an innate thing for me. I'm uncomfortable doing it, but I do it. It is what it is.
And sometimes they still glean information from that. You just have to have a particular sounding name, or you take, a particular from a particular background, and they already make their assumptions without even seeing you. So,
But
and of
again, they
course,
may make a positive assumption, and that's why we're saying here tonight there is a case of positive discrimination. We don't know.
Sometimes even just putting where you studied, what university you went to is enough to tell them, the key
whether
things
for
that they
them to
want
be
to know.
for or against you.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Well, ladies, I guess we've alluded to some of this tonight, but the second question I really want to throw out is whether or not the concept of positive discrimination in itself is an oxymoron. Well, the absurdity of that context, and whether or not we feel, in light of that, if the notion is a slight to groups who may be defined as having special characteristics. In other words, do you think that by virtue of talking about positive discrimination, we're underestimating or slighting perhaps ourselves? Well, okay, I'll jump in. For me, really and truly, the context of having even to think of having positive discrimination is really an absurdity. And the reason for that is, had we been in an ideal world where there was equality, we would neither have negative or positive discrimination as concepts to begin with. And so, discrimination by the nature of the word itself is a negative thing. So, how on earth can we then want to build something positive out of something that by nature is negative? And in that context, that's why it's so hard to do. And that's why it's possibly illegal. It is an oxymoron. And in my view, the context, the very notion of having to wait to be positively discriminated in favor of, I can't spin that any other way, is a slight in my mind. It's a slight to who I am as a person, because we've alluded to that. I don't need or I don't want to have to wait for positive discrimination to be recognized, if that makes any sense. So I feel that it's a slight to people like me or people with other special characteristics.
I agree with the first part of what you were saying in terms of if we were in an ideal world. If we were in an ideal world and everything was all equal and fair, and there would be no need for us to even be having this conversation. But the fact remains that we're not. And if we don't agitate for things like this, then some of the people who are in marginalized groups would be even further behind than they are. And even with things like, I guess the American version or maybe the North American version is called affirmative action, where they might, well, there I think it's legal and it's maybe slightly different to the definition that's here in the UK, whereas you qualify for things and you own things on your merit, but they need to have a certain amount of a minority, quote unquote minority, to fill the quota, or for your business or educational institution to be seen as diverse. You have to have a certain quota of whether racial minority or gendered persons or abled or disabled persons, etc. So I think there is a case for it in terms of we don't live in an ideal world, unfortunately. And until we do, I think, we have to agitate for persons who are in minority groups to have a seat at the table. Especially my qualifier would be that they qualify, that they are competent, and all the other things that they need to be there. Once they have those, then sure, they should have a seat at the table.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Tassa has said. I think it's definitely an oxymoron. The word discrimination in itself is so negative that, if you were told that you were positively, like you were trying to put it, Yolanda, I'm not even sure how you put that, you were positively discriminated in favor of. It's how does that make it any better? The sentiment behind it and what we're trying to achieve might be positive, but by the use of that word discrimination, it becomes a problem, which is why I guess in the UK we talk about positive action as opposed to positive discrimination. But that in itself is a different, that's actually a different meaning. That it means something else to the affirmative action that Natasha talked about. But yeah, I'm certainly uncomfortable with positive discrimination for those reasons.
It's an interesting one because I have heard a number, and I suppose this is going to kind of focus in on one particular group, but I've heard a number of African Americans elbow out against affirmative action and say, I have my degree and I didn't buy it and I wasn't, discriminated for, I earned my degree, rightfully so, kind of thing. And I think it's speaking to that notion of when you start to fill the spaces up through affirmative action or positive discrimination, if it is not done based on ability and based on merit, how do you then start to decipher who are the individuals who actually can do the work or can, fulfill whatever it is that you're there for, as against people who are just ticking a box? So yeah, it is troublesome, and it is. Yeah, I think we're all agreeing that it is an oxymoron. And
Yeah, and I think it's what really behind it is the emotions that come behind it. It's really, how does it make somebody feel? Can it ever make you feel good? I mean, I don't think it can. Although yes, you're in a good place, you have a great job, you've been selected, but do you really feel good? I don't think you can ever feel good under those kinds of terms of employment or terms of positioning in whatever it might be, whether workplace or elsewhere. And so, to be honest, then, ladies, do you even think that any organization openly practice positive discrimination? And if they do, should they openly admit it, or should it still remain something that is discreet? I'm guessing that you're going to say it has to be discreet because it's illegal, but can they put a different spin on it? Is there scope for organizations to somehow buy into this in a different way? I don't know.
I'm going to jump in here, and I'm going to start off by thinking about the context in which we're now finding ourselves. Post George Floyd, post Black Lives Matter protest, post the world waking up to to racial discrimination and to racial injustice, and suddenly everybody realizing, hang on, we are way behind the times and we need to fix this. Okay, this is the context in which we're finding ourselves now. And even though the law has not yet changed to enable people to do, positive discrimination or affirmative action or anything that legally would help them to redress the balance, there are a number of organizations and businesses, etc., who are trying their best in the same context in which they find themselves to try and bring in more board members, try and bring in more employees, etc., that are diverse and that try to mix up the perspective a little bit. And I think it's going to be a very tricky one to do that discreetly, when the context is such that everybody is saying it's not good.
I think,
What are you
Raquel.
saying tonight? I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah.
Raquel, we did lose a bit of your ending remarks, so I'm not sure if you just want to pick it up from the end.
Okay.
I just was saying, it's going to be hard to be discreet about it in the context in which we find ourselves now, especially when people are pointing fingers at organizations and statutory bodies and saying, what are you doing about this? You do not have enough representation. So I kind of feel as though at the moment, there isn't even really any point in trying to be discreet about it. It needs fixed. So go ahead and fix it.
I think at the moment what we have is, when you look at certain job adverts, what companies are saying is applications from a particular group are particularly welcome. So that sends out the signal. And I think that's as far as they can go in terms of putting it out there. So it sends out a signal that we know that there's an underrepresentation here and we want to fix it and we're welcoming you to apply. But at the end of the day, it still boils down to your merit. All they're saying is, please don't feel deterred in any way from applying, please apply anyway. and let's see where it gets you. Of course, you apply anyway. And if what's happened is that you have gone through you have experienced obstacles, you have experienced hurdles in your journey, that means that put next to, I don't know, a white counterpart, a male counterpart, a full able counterpart, you've experienced some level of disadvantage because of your journey. What we do right now in the UK doesn't fix that. It doesn't fix that. There is, however, positive action, which I'd alluded to earlier on, which is where an organization looks within. And I think it's more to do with maybe within. An organization looks at its workforce, looks at particular groups, and looks at, is there a disadvantage that this particular group is experiencing, and what can we put in place to help people in that group? So is it additional training? Is it additional support? What is it that needs to be there to kind of put them on a more level playing field? And the reason that is considered okay in the UK is because you're not discriminating against anybody else. What you're doing actually is addressing a disadvantage in one group and trying to bring them up to a level where that disadvantage, is gone, or at least dealt with. And so nobody else should be negatively impacted by the fact that somebody who was disadvantaged was helped along. So that's why positive action is what we talk about in the UK, and where organizations are supposed to at least put in resources and efforts to try and address issues like that.
I think also that the public and certain people in society play a part in holding a mirror up to organizations. And rolling off of what Raquel mentioned about people becoming more aware since the George Floyd situations and maybe the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that, people are holding companies accountable, and they're like, okay, who's on your board? Who's on your board of directors? Who's sitting in your decision-making capacity? What is your percentage of disabled persons in your company, or ethnic minority people and things like that? And they're holding those companies to task, and withholding their services or withholding their dollars and things like that if they don't think that company or institution has proper diversity. So I think in light of that as well, a lot of companies, as Angela also said, are making sure to include certain things in the recruitment processes that, if we're keen for persons from this particular, group to apply and things like that. So I think also society has played a role in holding up a mirror to those institutions and organizations who have historically not been very diverse.
Yeah, I think just to sum it up in my mind, notwithstanding that the Sewell report says that the UK is doing very well, there isn't racism. That's a whole nother conversation. But I do think that within recent times, I have actually come across job adverts that have been specifically earmarked and designed and said from the onset, this is a job for somebody from the ethnic minority community. And it was called something under the George Floyd resolution. And that one of the criteria was that you have to belong to the ethnic minority community. But that wasn't a job in international human rights organizations. So I'm not sure if those organizations have a different kind of mandate or remit that they can be more expressive, for want of a better word.
But I think also, Yolanda, I wonder whether it's to do with, there are certain situations even here in the UK where you can specify that the applicant for this job must be from, because it's a requirement of the job. Either because maybe they're working with a particular group of people and they need to understand the language and culture. So that is allowed if it's a genuine requirement for the job that you're doing, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. That is one way of getting around the square in the circle. The other thing is that even if you look at it in a wider context, like the funding arena, we ourselves have had experience where the funding arena is specifically earmarking some fund for racial justice projects or other projects that might have otherwise not been able to access much needed funding support. So there are different ways, I suppose, in which companies or organizations can get around it, but it still remains a very difficult task, and there's a long way to go. I know this conversation can go on, and I know we're coming down to the end. So here's the question, ladies. Honestly, I know we've talked around in circles, but honestly, would you yourself, if you were a manager, if you were in a company, would you practice? Would you want to be in a position where you positively discriminate? And would you knowingly accept positive discrimination in any situation? I think we answered the last part of the question before. Well, at least I said I would be uncomfortable with it. And I think all of us said that. But what about the first part? Would you?
Actually, I'm gonna have an opposing view to you, Yolande, with the last part. But, no, you said you'd be uncomfortable with accepting. I would be comfortable in accepting positive discrimination, as in the context that you defined it, if I knew that I had the skills and I'm saying I qualified for the position in order to make a change internally. If I felt like I could make a change internally and I could change the company's or organization's outlook on certain things, then I'll be like, you can think what you want in terms of why you hired me, but when I get in there, I'm going to show you something,
Yeah.
But if I got in there and I realized it was tokenistic and you just wanted a butt on the chair and I'll be like a toothless lion, then I'll be very much not, lasting through my 90-day period. I'll be like, okay, I'm out, because you just wanted me to look good on paper, but you don't really want me to do anything. So
Yeah.
in that case, then I would definitely accept the positive discrimination, because I would have something to prove.
That's a good way of putting it, Tassa. So I'm 50-50. To be honest, you're right.
And I would go a step further, probably, or it's probably not even a step further, but I'm thinking also of times when I have known that I have been the token Black person, but I recognize that my presence here opens the door for somebody else and is a visible statement for somebody else. Like, look, I am here, you can come here too, and I'm going to do everything that I can to push this ladder so that you can step up, because that's what needs to happen. But, and earlier on in the conversation, I did want to throw this in there, that there are a number of people who want to pull the ladder up. They're in, and they want to pull that ladder up. They don't want anybody else.
That's a whole nother podcast, Ricky.
Angela, you've got final words.
So, yeah, I mean, again, in the same way that Natasha defined it and Raquel has kind of expanded on that, I just need to know that I merited the job, right? I don't want anybody to be able to say you only got in there because you were Black, or because you were a woman. You need to understand that I can do the job. And so I think it's going to be difficult for me in circumstances, even where I know I can do the job, but they've applied positive discrimination to get me in there above a white person. I'm still going to have some level of discomfort about it, I have to say. And I think the only reason that I would accept that kind of role is exactly what Raquel has described there. Being there as a light to others who want to be there, and I need to see somebody that they identify with there as well, so that you can start to see a movement towards change.
Yeah. Well, hey, I hope we're not accused of positive discrimination by having 4 women on our podcast, Black women on this podcast.
We have a male comment. We have a male comment that needs.
I am going to read it. It has been a very sober conversation, so that was a lame attempt at lightening it. There is a comment from Michael. It says positive discrimination is very much needed. In general, positive discrimination just counteract negative discrimination, and it is in counteracting that it nullifies and it does not acknowledge the discrimination we know today. So, that's a very fair comment. Sums up all of what we've been saying tonight. Ezekiel, I don't know if we should take that as funny, serious, or funny as in cynicism for the system, but I would like to think that it is the latter. Seriously, ladies, it's really a wrap for us. We thank those of you who have been here with us tonight, those of you who have been here for the last five episodes. Next week, Friday, it's Christmas. Well, it's not quite Christmas yet, but next Friday, we will be kind of doing it in a little bit of a different way. We will be having a special episode on the Thursday. Next Thursday, we will be doing our holiday special. So we hope to have quite a few of you participating in that. And before we go, we want you to remember to send us those taglines. I can't talk tonight. Those taglines, keep them coming. All right, Ezekiel, thank you. He says his ha 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 was in response to my comment that we'll be accused of being positive discrimination because of the composition of our panel. Yes, Ezekiel. So it is time to say goodbye and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to our On Mute Now podcast. If you would like to be in on our conversations live, follow us on our social media platforms during our live broadcasts. We are at On Mute Now 1 on Twitter and at On Mute Now on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, and on your favorite podcast platforms. Like, follow, and rate us on Apple Podcasts and leave us a voice message on Anchor. Like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube channel. If you want to raise the volume on something or contact us, email onmutenow1@gmail.com. Unmute now.